Today we are digging into what might just be the biggest financial scandal in the history of Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. It's an incredible story about how a jaw-dropping amount of public money meant for development in one of the most remote parts of the country, just vanished.
So, let's start with the big number that's on everyone's mind. 40 billion rupees. That is a huge amount of money, something like 144 million US dollars. Now, to put that in perspective, this is the amount that allegedly disappeared from the treasury of a single remote district, Upper Kohistan, in just 6 years. This wasn't a leak, you guys. This was a flood.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the sheer scale of the scandal itself. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the corrupt scheme. We'll follow the timeline as the investigation finally kicks off, check out the absolutely astonishing recovery of assets, and then we'll unpack the legal battles and the political fallout.
So our story really starts in Upper Kohistan. It's a beautiful, mountainous district where government funds are supposed to build things like roads, schools, and hospitals for the people there. But as investigators would soon find out, the very system that was supposed to deliver that progress had been completely hijacked.
Investigators eventually managed to zero in on a single provincial account, and what they found was that for 6 years straight, massive, unusually high sums of money were just being pulled out, in a pattern that made absolutely no sense. This wasn't a single heist, it was a slow, systematic bleeding of the public purse.
To really get your head around the scale here, just look at this comparison. The district's entire annual budget for development was usually somewhere around 1 billion rupees. The amount stolen over 6 years? 40 billion. We're talking dozens of times more than what was ever meant to be spent. It's a number that's almost hard to believe.
So the big question is, how on earth do you steal that much money from a government treasury? Well, it wasn't some simple smash and grab job. No, this was a really sophisticated, multi-step operation that, it required people on the inside at multiple levels to pull off.
So here's the game plan, right? This is how the scheme allegedly worked. First, you create a whole network of fake, ghost construction companies. Then, you have these ghost firms win contracts for projects that, well, they were never going to be built. With these fake projects now on the books, you start issuing forged checks from the Treasury, and we're talking over 1,200 of them. And finally, you funnel all that cash through a maze of shell accounts until it basically disappears. And this was not the work of some lone genius. This was a well-oiled machine. The whole thing apparently worked with the help of insiders at the Communication and Works Department, the District Accounts Office, and even local branches of the National Bank of Pakistan. They were all allegedly colluding with this web of contractors. Okay, so you heard me mention that word, banamidars. It's a really crucial term to understand what happened here. A banamidar is basically a frontman, a proxy. The main suspects allegedly bought up tons of property and assets, but they did it in the names of their relatives, their drivers, other associates, all to hide the fact that they were the real owners. A scheme this big, this brazen, can't stay hidden forever. Eventually, the sheer volume of these crazy transactions started raising red flags, and what began as some quiet questions in a government committee soon just exploded into a full-blown national investigation.
And once the story broke, man, things moved fast. In April 2025, Pakistan's National Accountability Bureau, or NAB, went public with this bombshell. By May, probes were being launched left and right and officials were being suspended. And by July, the first handcuffs came out. NAB made its initial 8 arrests and the hunt was officially on.
So as these investigators dug deeper and deeper, they started to uncover something incredible. A massive trail of assets, property, cars, cash, all allegedly purchased with the stolen money. And the recovery effort that followed was, well, it was just staggering.
In total, investigators managed to recover or freeze about 25 billion rupees worth of stuff. And get this, the vast majority of it, 17 billion, was tied up in real estate. They also froze 5 billion that was sitting in 73 different bank accounts and seized another 2.5 billion in cold, hard cash and luxury cars. And when you look at what they actually found, it's just mind-boggling. We're talking over 100 properties, plazas, apartments, farmhouses, 77 luxury vehicles, and then just massive stashes of cash, gold, and foreign currency that were seized during raids. It's like something out of a movie. And the attempts to hide the cash just got almost comical. In one of the most vivid details to come out of this whole thing, investigators, acting on a tip from the main accused wife, found 20 million rupees, that's 2 crore, literally stuffed inside paint cans. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Okay, so they've got the suspects, they've seized a mountain of assets. What happens next? Well, the case moves into the legal and political arenas. And this next phase was all about plea bargains, a lot of finger-pointing, and the big search for who was ultimately responsible.
So here's a quick look at some of the key players. The alleged mastermind? A clerk in the Communication and Works Department named Kaysar Iqbal. His driver, Mumtaz, who acted as a frontman, was actually released after a 4 billion rupee plea bargain. You also had 10 others acting as binamadars who surrendered, and the investigation even pulled in prominent figures, like the politician Azam Swati, who was questioned by NAB.
Unsurprisingly, this whole thing ignited a political firestorm. Opposition leaders, they basically called it a disgrace and proof of systemic corruption under the ruling PTI party's watch in the province. Now, in response, federal officials were praising NAB's investigation, while the provincial government was stressing that it was conducting its own thorough inquiry.
But this whole thing goes way beyond just a few corrupt people. The real question is, how is this even possible? Well, a government inquiry pointed right at the root cause: severe administrative weaknesses. In other words, the system itself was broken. There was no real oversight, there were unapproved checkbooks just floating around. The basic safeguards meant to prevent exactly this kind of fraud had just totally collapsed.
And that leaves us with the final and most critical question. Look, seizing assets and arresting suspects, that's one thing. But with this investigation exposing such deep, systemic failures, the real challenge isn't just cleaning up this one mess. It's about fixing the broken system to make absolutely sure that 40 billion rupees can never just walk out the door again.